Let's start with the summers that were just uncomfortably hot and slowly work our way towards the ones that literally cooked people alive. Today, when the AC breaks, we complain, post a story, and threaten to move to Antarctica. But history has seen heat so brutal that asphalt melted, railroad tracks twisted, and people died just by existing. No explosions, no floods, no buildings collapsing. Just air that got a few degrees too warm and stayed that way long enough to quietly kill tens of thousands of people. In this video, we're going to count down 8 of the worst heat waves in human history. Not just, hey, it's sweaty out hot, but weeks where entire cities became slow-motion ovens. And by the time we reach number 1, you'll see how one invisible disaster managed to kill more people than some wars, without a single drop of rain or a single gust of wind. Number 8. The 1995 Chicago Heatwave, when a modern city melted. In July of 1995, Chicago found out what happens when you mix extreme heat with extreme denial. The forecast said, hot people shrugged, it's summer, it's the Midwest. How bad could it be? Pretty bad. For several days, temperatures soared above 40 degrees Celsius, over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. With humidity so high, it felt like breathing soup. At night, the temperature refused to drop. Concrete, brick, and asphalt had absorbed the day's heat and spent the dark hours slowly radiating it right back into people's bedrooms. If you had air conditioning and money to pay the bill, you were uncomfortable. If you didn't, you were in trouble. Picture an elderly man living alone in a third-floor walk-up. No elevator, no AC. He's scared of crime, so he keeps his windows shut and his bars locked. His fan just pushes hot air around the room like a hairdryer on sad mode. His body, already dealing with heart disease or diabetes, is forced to work overtime just to keep his core temperature down. Eventually, it can't. Now multiply him by thousands. Ambulance sirens scream through the city day and night. Hospitals overflowed with patients suffering from heat stroke, dehydration, and cardiac arrest. The medical examiner's office ran out of space and had to use refrigerated trucks as temporary morgues. The most chilling part? Many victims weren't found right away. Days later, neighbors finally noticed a smell in the hallway, or newspapers piling up, or the fact that Mrs. Johnson in 4B hadn't complained about anything in almost a week. Officially, hundreds of deaths were attributed directly to the heat. When you include excess deaths from heart and respiratory failure, the number climbs well past 1,000. And the pattern was clear. The people dying were mostly poor, mostly elderly, often living in dangerous neighborhoods where opening a window or going to a cooling center felt riskier than staying put. In Chicago, it wasn't just the sun that killed people. It was heat plus loneliness, plus a city that didn't believe weather could be a serial killer. Number 7. The 1936 North American Heatwave, the Dust Bowl Oven. If 1995 Chicago was a modern failure, 1936 was Mother Nature playing on hardcore difficulty. It's the middle of the Great Depression. The center of North America is already deep in the Dust Bowl. Years of drought and bad farming practices have turned huge areas into dry, eroding soil. Then, the heat arrives. In state after state, temperatures smash previous records. 40 degrees Celsius, 43 degrees Celsius, 45 degrees Celsius, 104, 113 degrees Fahrenheit, and higher. Week after week of blazing sun, with almost no relief at night. Most rural families don't have electricity, let alone air conditioning. Fans are a luxury. Ice is precious. Shade is survival. Imagine a farmhouse on the Great Plains. The wind that used to cool the porch now feels like someone turned a giant hairdryer toward the house. Chickens pant in the dust. Cows stand in what little shade there is, ribs showing, tongues hanging out. Inside, the family has moved their bedding to the ground floor, hoping it's a little cooler. They sleep in damp sheets. They wake up already sweating. Out in the fields, crops aren't just wilting, they're dying. Stalks of corn stand like brittle matchsticks. Topsoil, dry and loose, lifts into the air in towering dust storms that blot out the sun and grind into people's eyes and lungs. Train tracks warp, roads crack. People collapse while working, or simply sitting on front porches, their bodies unable to keep up with the relentless heat. By the end of the summer, thousands across the US and Canada are dead. For many families, the heatwave isn't just a disaster on its own. It's the final push that forces them off the land. They pack what they can onto trucks, join the stream of migrants heading west, and hope there's something better on the other side. The Dust Bowl didn't just bake the soil. It slow roasted the American dream. Number 6. The 2015 India-Pakistan Heatwave, Asphalt and Ashes. If you've ever complained about summer in a big city, try adding 10 degrees, cutting the power, and removing all shade. In May and June of 2015, parts of India and Pakistan were hit by a heat wave that turned crowded streets into literal hot plates. Daytime temperatures soared past 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit in many areas. Some locations reported highs close to 48-49 degrees Celsius, 118-120 degrees Fahrenheit. At those temperatures, the line between outside and inside an oven starts to blur. In cities, asphalt streets softened and buckled. People could see heat shimmering in the air above the road. Some surfaces were hot enough to burn skin on contact. Now picture a daily wage laborer in a city like Karachi or Delhi. He works outside maybe as a rickshaw driver, a street vendor, a construction worker. If he doesn't show up, he doesn't get paid. If he doesn't get paid, his family doesn't eat. So he goes to work. He stands in direct sun for hours. He drinks what water he can afford. The air around him feels like someone pointed a giant oven door at his face. At night, huge swaths of the city don't cool down. Narrow alleys and concrete buildings trap the heat. Power cuts, caused by overloaded grids, shut off fans and air conditioners just when people need them most. Hospitals become crash courses in what extreme heat does to the human body. Confusion, headaches, hallucinations, organ failure, morgues overflow. Media outlets show images of rows of shrouded bodies, while officials scramble to dig mass graves and distribute water. Most of the dead are the poor, the old, the homeless, and those whose work keeps them outdoors, no matter what the thermometer says. In parts of India and Pakistan, the choice was brutally simple. Work in the heat and risk dying, or don't work and risk starving. Number 5. The 2010 Russian Heatwave, Moscow on fire. Russia is supposed to be cold. Snow, fur hats, frozen rivers, that's the brand. In the summer of 2010, Western Russia decided to try a rebrand. Welcome to the sauna. For weeks, a massive blocking pattern in the atmosphere parked hot air over the region. Temperatures in Moscow climbed above 38-39 degrees Celsius, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, smashing local records. Now, 38 degrees Celsius might not sound extreme if you live in a desert city, but Moscow wasn't built for heat. Apartments had radiators but no air conditioning. Public buildings had windows that barely opened. People who spent their whole lives complaining about winter suddenly watched the thermometer soar past anything they'd ever experienced. Then the fire started. Drought-dried forests and peat bogs around the city caught fire and burned. Thick, choking smoke rolled into Moscow and other cities, turning the air into a toxic fog. Imagine stepping outside your apartment and inhaling a mixture of hot air, ash, and smog so thick you can't see the end of the street. The sun is a fuzzy orange ball overhead. Eyes burn. Throats sting. Car alarms and church bells fade into a muffled background. Hospitals see a spike in patients with breathing problems, heart issues, and heat-related illnesses. Mortality rates rise sharply. Official numbers are debated, but estimates suggest tens of thousands of excess deaths across the region. The heat also devastates crops. Russia, a major grain exporter, loses a significant portion of its harvest. The government bans grain exports to protect domestic supply, nudging global food prices upward. Moscow has survived invasions, revolutions, and blockades. But in 2010, it nearly lost to its own summer. Number 4. The 2021 Western North America Heat Dome, the experiment. What happens when a region known for mild weather suddenly gets temperatures more suited to the Sahara? In late June 2021, Western Canada and the U.S. Pacific Northwest found out. A rare and extreme heat dome formed, a high-pressure system that trapped hot air and compressed it downwards, like putting a glass lid over the region and turning the stove to max. Cities like Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland, famous for rain and moderate summers, suddenly saw daytime highs of 46 degrees Celsius, 115 degrees Fahrenheit. In the small Canadian town of Lytton, the temperature hit nearly 49.6 degrees Celsius, 121 degrees Fahrenheit, the highest ever recorded in Canada. 2 days later, much of the town burned down in a wildfire. The problem wasn't just the numbers. It was the lack of preparation. In places where extreme heat wasn't common, many homes and apartments simply didn't have air conditioning. Why pay for AC in a climate that never gets that hot? Until it does. People tried everything. Sleeping in basements, camping in backyards, draping wet sheets over doorways, crowding into libraries, malls, and cooling centers. Fans sold out, ice sold out. Hospitals, again, filled up. Wildlife suffered too. Millions of coastal animals' mussels, clams, starfish literally cooked on beaches as tide pools reached lethal temperatures. In just a few days, hundreds of people died across the region from heat-related causes. Climate scientists looked at the event and said, in scientific terms, yeah, this should have been basically impossible. Until we heated the planet up. The 2021 heat dome turned one of the world's most comfortable climates into a live demo of what unprepared really means. Number 3. The 1901 US heatwave. Before air conditioning. We're used to thinking of heat waves in a world full of electronics, AC units, fans, refrigerators. Now imagine similar temperatures in 1901. No home air conditioning. Limited electricity. Cities rapidly growing upward and outward with brick, stone, and asphalt that trapped heat. That summer, large parts of the United States baked under a relentless sun. Temperatures soared into the upper 30 seconds and low 40 seconds Celsius, 100 seconds in Fahrenheit, and stayed there. Newspapers at the time described people dropping in the streets, newsboys collapsing on sidewalks, factory workers fainting on the job, laborers passing out on scaffolding and falling to their deaths, children dying in cramped tenements with no ventilation. Streetcars became rolling ovens. Buildings, designed to hold in warmth during winter, now trapped hot air like giant brick thermoses. Doctors talked about sunstroke and heat apoplexy without fully understanding the physiology behind it. Cities counted bodies but didn't always connect the dots. In some places, officials started to notice patterns. They opened parks at night so families could sleep on the grass. They established early versions of cooling centers, public buildings where people could at least sit in shade with a breeze. They experimented with tree planting and park building as a way to cool neighborhoods. But for many victims of 1901, the heat wave was just a freak tragedy, not a recognized type of disaster. In 1901, the heatwave didn't just expose people to danger, it exposed how little they understood they were in one. Number 2. Mid-20th century European heatwaves. A continent boils. Between world wars, political upheavals, and economic crises, Europe spent much of the 20th century dealing with man-made disasters. But the weather had its moments too. In years like 1947 and 1976, large parts of Europe were hit by intense heat and drought that pushed societies already under strain to the edge. Imagine post-war France or Italy in 1947. Cities and infrastructure still recovering from bombing, populations displaced, food supplies precarious. Then a scorching summer arrives. Rivers shrink, crops wither in the fields, forest fires ignite in the hills. Farmers watch entire harvests vanish. Cattle die in dried-up pastures. Water is rationed in some regions, turning basic hygiene and cooking into daily negotiations. Fast forward to 1976 inches, the UK and parts of Western Europe. Britain, not exactly famous for sunshine, finds itself in an extended drought. Brown lawns become a national symbol. Reservoirs drop so low that drowned villages reappear. Standpipes are installed in some streets so people can queue for limited water. It's not just uncomfortable, it's structurally dangerous. When crops fail and food prices rise, political tensions follow. When rivers drop and power plants can't get enough cooling water, electricity supplies wobble. Heat waves quietly stress every system humans rely on, from agriculture to energy to public health. For Europe, the 20th century wasn't just about hot politics. The weather was also trying to overthrow people. Number 1. The 2003 European Heatwave. The Silent Massacre. All of that brings us to 2003. When Europe discovered that the deadliest disaster of the decade wasn't a flood, or a storm, or a terrorist attack. It was summer. From June to August, a powerful high-pressure system parked itself over much of the continent. France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Germany, and others endured weeks of scorching heat. Daytime temperatures frequently topped 35-40 degrees Celsius, 95-104 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes higher. In many places, the night stayed frighteningly warm, giving people's bodies no chance to cool down and recover. Now, combine that with a few very human factors. Many European homes and apartments weren't built with air conditioning in mind. August is vacation month. Especially in France and Italy, families leave cities for the coast or countryside. Elderly relatives are often left behind in cities, in small flats, trusting that everything will be fine. In Paris, the streets emptied as younger people disappeared on holiday. In high-rise buildings and cramped apartments, older residents sat in stifling rooms, shutters closed against the sun, windows barely cracked for fear of burglars or noise. Days blurred together. Thirst, headaches, dizziness. Some called for help, some didn't want to bother anyone. Hospitals began to notice they were unusually busy. Then morgues ran out of space. At one point, in parts of France, refrigerated trucks were used to store bodies. Funeral homes and cemeteries struggled to keep up. Many of the dead weren't found until neighbors complained of a smell in the stairwell. Some were discovered after their families returned from vacation, expecting to find grandma watching TV, and instead finding a silent apartment. Across Europe, estimates suggest that the 2003 heatwave caused tens of thousands of excess deaths. Some put the number above 70,000. More than many earthquakes. More than many floods. More, in some countries, than violent crime does in years. There was no single dramatic image. No tower collapsing. No bridge washing away. Just people quietly dying in their own homes. After 2003, European governments were forced to rethink heat. They developed early warning systems. They created registers of vulnerable people to check on during heat alerts. Cities opened cooling centers and adjusted work and school schedules. The 2003 heatwave proved you don't need wind, waves, or fire to have a catastrophe. All you need is heat, and a society that underestimates it. From pre-air conditioning cities where people dropped in the streets to Dust Bowl farms that turned into dry ovens, from South Asian megacities where workers chose between heat and hunger to Russian capitals choking on smoke, from rainy coastal towns suddenly hitting desert temperatures to quiet European apartments hiding thousands of invisible tragedies. Heatwaves have quietly become some of the deadliest disasters on Earth. Unlike hurricanes or earthquakes, they don't photograph well. There's no dramatic footage of buildings collapsing or cars floating down rivers. Most of the time, all you see is sunlight. Maybe a shimmer above the road. Maybe some people buying extra ice. The real damage is hidden in hospital stats, in death certificates that list heart failure or respiratory arrest, instead of it was just too hot for too long. And as the planet warms, these once-in-a-generation extremes are starting to show up more often in more places, including cities that were never built with serious heat in mind. So here are the questions. Which of these heat waves shocked you the most? And in your city, do people actually treat extreme heat like a real danger? Or is it still just one of those hot days until it's already too late?